The biggest question in the world of music in 2025 has been, where is Susan Boyle now? Because really, how can you go from being unknown to making it big on Britain's Got Talent, and then giving one of the best acts that huge stage has ever seen? After that, you're gone like a dream. She didn't just sing I Had a Dream though. She made her dream come true by becoming famous all over the world. So she picked up the mic right away, and the song's first note rang out. She was a quiet person in her home country of Scotland before she became one of the most famous singers in the world overnight. Susan has put out albums, played all over the world, and inspired millions of people with her voice and her drive since that unforgettable first show. The cameras then turned to record something else, something new, and Susan and a million other things that should have been important seem to have been forgotten. Sue Boyle was born on April 1, 1960, in a small hospital in a town in the Scottish Highlands. She was the ninth and youngest child in a family of people who worked hard. Bridget, her mother, was in her late 40s when she had her. Giving birth to a child at that age was very dangerous. They told her that it might be bad for both her and the baby, but because Bridget had a strong faith, she refused to end the pregnancy. In Blackburn, the Boyle family lived in a small house. They did not have a lot of money, and having another kid made things even worse. Sue felt like she didn't quite fit in from the start. She would feel this way for a long time. It was hard for Susan to be born. The birth was dangerous because her mother had a sickness that kept her from getting enough air for a short time. Doctors told Susan's parents that she had some brain damage. In the house, the damage was worse. Patrick, her father, had served in the war and came back greatly changed. Quite often, he looked angry and shaky. Their poor and crowded home turned into a scary place. Susan was sometimes the object of her angry dad's yells. There was pain in her body and in her mind. Still, Susan later said she loved her dad and thought he was having problems inside that he couldn't handle. Because of those painful memories, she found it hard to trust people afterward. Going to school wasn't very comforting either. It stuck with her for a long time that she was thought to have a mental illness. Her teachers at school said she learned slowly. They didn't know how to help her because she was having trouble following along in class. She often felt like she didn't fit because other kids made fun of her. She was picked on all the time. People in her class laughed at her when she passed out because she had a disease called epilepsy. They called her mean names, like Susie, which means simple and touchy. The teachers did not look out for her. They used belts to hit her, almost every day at times. She was going through a terrible and hard time. It didn't get better, which was too bad. Susie fell in love for the first time when she was in her mid-20s, but her father stopped the relationship without telling her. He picked up the phone one day and told the caller that Susan didn't want to talk to him. Soon after, he had a child with someone else. Susan was very sad. It hurt her so much that she never forgot. She would never feel the same way about love or trust again. She stayed home with her parents while her 8 brothers and sisters left to start their own lives. She took care of her parents as they got older. She took care of her dad until he died, and she stayed with her mom to care for her until she died at 91 years old. Susan saw a lot less of the world. She didn't go out very often. She didn't hang out with many people. To take care of her family, she gave up her own hopes and dreams. Susan had not moved around much while her brothers got jobs and started families. Susan had to deal with the terrible news for years, and everyone thought she had brain damage from birth. That quickly changed though when she found out the truth. Sue didn't have any brain damage. She had Asperger's syndrome, which is a form of autism, and she was smarter than most people her age. What I thought about her before was wrong. This new fact finally made sense of everything. Susan was relieved, and she saw herself clearly for the first time since the awful cloak that had made her look ugly was gone. She cut the song Cry Me a River for a charity CD in the late 1990s. There were only 1,000 made. A newspaper in her town said nice things about her singing and performance, but not many people outside of her town heard it. At least not yet. No one knew about her gift. Sue saved all of her money and used it to make a test tape that same year. With his song she sang Cry Me a River and Killing Me Softly. The tapes were sent to record labels and TV shows all over the country. No one replied. No one ever heard the tapes again. Susan was very sad. It seemed like no one was interested in hearing her. Sue's life changed again at the start of the next decade. Her dear sister Kathleen died all of a sudden. She has always been Susan's biggest fan. Susan's heart broke when she died, and she could no longer sing. Susie didn't say anything for 2 years. She stopped playing music, stopped taking lessons, and stayed away from things that made her think of music. Kathy had always told her to let everyone hear her voice. That voice and her sister's voice were no longer there. Susan slowly began to sing again after a few years, but her life had changed by then. She was now taking care of her mother, who was in her late 80s, and needed help every day. Susie cooked, cleaned, and watched over Bridget in their small house. On the other hand, Bridget kept Susan's hope alive. Sue always heard her say, "You have a gift, use it." Susan felt better after hearing those words, and spending time with her mother. Even when Susan almost gave up on dreams, her mother's faith in her was the only thing that kept her going. She chose to do something brave. She put in for a role on the TV show My Kind of People. People all over the country had their first real chance to see her, but she didn't make it on TV. Even though it hurt, she kept singing at home and in small venues around town. She stuck with her dream the whole time. In 2007, Susan went through another terrible breakup. Bryant, her mother, died at the age of 91. Susan thought the end of the world had come again. The person who had always been there for her was no longer there. Sue stopped singing after that. For almost 2 years, she barely left the house. She was sad and lived in silence. Neighbors and friends got very scared. She didn't seem to want to do anything or have any energy. Her dream, which she had held on to for a long time, seemed to go away when her mother died. The house used to be full of music and laughter, but now it was quiet and sad. During that time, Susan shut down a lot. Her little Blackburn house turned into her whole world. The blinds stayed shut. They didn't see her very often. Susan wouldn't talk to anyone for days on end. Her cat Pebbles was the only thing that kept her company most of the time. She skipped church. She didn't go to any events. She didn't even care about how she looked any longer. The house, which used to be full of love, was now a sad place. That's how it stayed until Susan slowly started to change. Sue promised her mother before she died that she would try to share her words with the world. In 2008, she made up her mind to keep her word. She was going to try out for the TV show Britain's Got Talent. She was 47 years old at the time. She didn't have a job. It didn't matter that she had never performed anywhere but in her small town. She wanted to do what her mother had asked, so she filled out the form and went to Glasgow to try out. She was scared. She had doubts, but she still went. In the end, Susan said, "I did it to show myself and everyone else that I could." Everything changed after that promise and brave act. It was the beginning of one of the most amazing stories in show business. On April 9, 2009, Susan walked out on stage at the Clyde Auditorium in Glasgow. No one paid attention to her. She was 47 years old, had messy hair, and wore a simple gold lace dress. The camera showed that people in the crowd were laughing, which meant they weren't expecting anything special from the person in front of them. Two of the judges, Amanda Holden and Piers Morgan, looked at each other with doubt in their eyes. Everyone in the building was shocked when Susan said she wanted to be as famous as singer Elaine Paige. Again, the cameras caught people's shock. There was a sense that everyone thought she would fail before she even sang a note. She then sang, "I Dreamed a Dream" from Les Miserables, and everything changed. There was silence in the room. Simon Cowell opened his mouth wide. Amanda Holden just stared in shock. Piers Morgan smiled in surprise. The judges went from being skeptical to amazed in a matter of seconds. The crowd jumped to their feet when Susan got to the powerful part of the song. It was hard to hear the clapping. Amanda Holden said something that was heard all over the world after the song was over. She added, "I honestly think that we were all being very silly, and I think that's the biggest wake-up call ever." People said what she said over and over again. Everyone thought about how quickly we judge other people. Someone with real ability doesn't have to look a certain way or be a certain age. Amanda's words became a part of Susan's story. Simon said after the show that he had never been so shocked. That show turned into a big deal. A lot of people from all over the world watched it live. The audience cheers that night didn't stay in the theater. By the next morning, videos of her tryout were all over the web. More than 25 million people watched the movie in just 1 week. That number went over 100 million in just 9 days. CNN, BBC and the New York Times were among the news outlets that wrote about her. People all over the world were moved by Susan's singing. The interview that Susan did became a sign of hope and breaking the easy rules in the entertainment business. One night, Susan's life changed. Online, well-known people like Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher talked about her. She was the most talked about person on social media by the middle of the month. Every hour, more than 1 million people watched her audition film. News shows all over the world wanted to talk about her. People even asked her to be on Oprah Winfrey's show. More than 50 different countries sent reporters to ask to talk to you. People from all over the world came to see her small church in Blackburn, Scotland. People from Japan and other faraway places came to see it. She went from living a quiet life to becoming a famous star in just a few days. In late May, she came back for the semi-finals of Britain's Got Talent. Remember Me from musical Cats was the song she sang this time. It was hard to wait because she was the last act of the night, but once she started to sing, the magic came back. People in the crowd cheered loudly. Amanda Holden, one of the judges, said that her act was truly amazing. That night, Susan got more votes than anyone else. She showed everyone that her first interview wasn't a fluke. Everyone thought Susan would win before the last show at the end of May. Most people who bet on her were sure she would win because her chances were the best. Her test video had been seen almost 200 million times by that point. There were crowds in bars and community centers in her hometown to cheer her on. The final was streamed live online for the first time because so many people wanted to see it. But many people were shocked when the final votes were counted. Not many of the more than 17 million people who watched chose Susan. Different One is the name of the dance group. Susan won in second place. It shocked people all over the world. People talked about the outcome even in places very far away. Susan stayed polite and kind. While the show was live, she told the winners, "The best people won." Still, a lot of friends were very sad. Fans didn't know this, but Susan herself was the most upset. It got around after the show that she had been upset backstage. She was said to have yelled, "I hate this show," as she ran down the hall. Some people said she hit someone with water and yelled at the hotel staff. Some people who knew her well said these rumors were not true. There was a lot of stress on her though. After a few days, the country heard some shocking news. She was taken to a posh London hospital. People from the royal family and other famous people went to this clinic when they needed help. Nearly 20 million people had seen her lose the final the night before. It really hurt her. She screamed at the directors, cried, and passed out. She was taken to the clinic by ambulance. The doctors said she was totally worn out and had a mental breakdown. She was very well known at this time. It had become one of the most watched movies on the internet ever. It got so bad that even the Prime Minister of Britain sent her well wishes. But the news was full of stories about her health. Some reporters even lied to her family to get news. It was so funny that someone even claimed to want to marry her. A British group that keeps an eye on the media steps in. They warned newspapers that it was against the law to pry into someone's private life, especially if the person had a mental illness. The media finally woke up after this happened. It proved how bad sudden success can be. Simon Cowell, one of the show's judges and producers, said that things had gone too far. He told Susan's family that she didn't have to go on the show's tour for the first time ever. People who are on the show usually have to go on tour. Simon said it was the worst week of his life later on. He accepted he was wrong and took full responsibility. The way the entertainment business treats its stars has changed because of what he did. Susan shocked everyone by saying she would go on the tour after all, just 3 days after she said she was going to stay in the clinic for a long time. Public was shocked by how quickly she got better. In the end, she talked about how scared she was in the office. She didn't have a phone, a TV or anyone to talk to. She was lost and had doubts about everything for 2 days. She knew she was just very tired though and needed to rest. People thought it was brave and strong of her to decide to go back. Her family and fans were there for her and were happy to see her come back. Susan did more than just come back. She amazed everyone. On the Britain's Got Talent tour, She did 20 of the 24 shows. Some of the places she sang were Aberdeen, Edinburgh, Dublin, Sheffield, Coventry, and Birmingham. People cheered for her and stood up. People in the news said she looked great. Both Susan and her friends had a great time on the tour. When her first record, I Dreamed a Dream, came out in late November 2009, nobody saw what was going to happen next. In the UK, she sold more than 400,000 records in just 1 week. Leona Lewis had set the previous record. In fact, she sold more records than the top 5 albums in the country put together, in the United States. In her first week, she sold more than 700,000 CDs. The first single by a female singer alone sold more copies than any other single since records began keeping track of sales in the early 1990s. It sold more than 2 million copies around the world in its first week. She had sold more than 10 million records by the end of that year. Big names like Eminem, Rihanna, and Lady Gaga couldn't even beat her sales. Amazon said that her record had the most pre-orders of any album ever. A few shops couldn't even keep it in stock. There was more to her fame than just one album. She became the first woman in UK history to have 3 albums in a row start at #1 over the next 2 years. They were called Someone to Watch Over Me, I Dreamed a Dream, and The Gift. Famous bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were the only ones who had done something similar before Susan. She did it in her late 40s without any special training or help from her record company. It even got to #1 in both the UK and the US at the same time. That was the first time a woman had ever done it. She had sold more than 25 million records around the world by 2021. 10 million of those were from her first record, but all of them did very well. In places like the US, UK, Australia, Japan, and New Zealand, her songs sold over 10 million copies. There were 4 Platinum Awards for I Dreamed a Dream in the US and 7 Platinum Awards in the UK. It kept going. For the 60th anniversary of the death of Queen Elizabeth II, she sang Mull of Kintyre at Windsor Castle. The Royal Scots Dragoon Guards joined her. It was now official that Susan Boyle was a national gem. The money she made was also great. She made what would be over $8 million today in her first year alone. Before she became famous, she lived in a small home in Blackburn, Scotland, that was supported by the government. She got by on disability funds. By the end of 2009, her first record had sold more than 9 million copies, and she was soon worth between $35 and $40 million. Behind the scenes, Susan's family was having trouble because of her new wealth. There were reports that her brother had said he would hurt himself if Susan didn't give him $50,000 to save his business. She felt like she had to give him the money, so she did. She was sick with a fever and a sore throat at the time. Jerry afterwards said that the threats were not true, but the family no longer trusted him. Susan made things worse by lying to other family members. She lied and said Jerry had forced her to do something, but it wasn't true. The lie, though, made things worse. When Susan gave another family member a big gift of cash, things broke down. Susan got mad when that person didn't say thank you, so she sent them texts. People thought those texts were rude, though. Susan was told by the cops to stop talking to the person. Susan had given her family almost $2 million over the years, but the money didn't bring them together. It only made them farther apart. She learned that she had type 2 diabetes, which is bad news for her health. They told her she needed to change her habits, or she could lose everything, even her singing voice. She stopped eating some things, and lost 50 pounds very quickly. Then CO showed up. Doctors told her that a simple illness could get worse and kill her. So Susan stayed inside, and was very careful to follow the safety rules. Sue had found love for the first time in her life at this point, when she was 53 years old. She met a nice doctor in Florida, while on tour in the US. He didn't know much about her music, but he knew who she was, and became friends with her, which turned into something more. Susan stayed simple and normal, even though she was famous and rich. She still lived in the same small house where she grew up, even though her songs and tours made her more than $20 million. It cost her $65,000 to buy. She bought the house next door for just over $100,000 to get more room. She only spent a few $100s a week on herself. She shopped for herself and didn't buy anything fancy. These choices helped her stay close to her roots. It was April 2022, when Susan had a stroke. It was hard for her to speak, because it almost took away her voice. She had to work hard to get better for more than a year. Thank goodness she did. She went back to Britain's Got Talent in June 2023 and sang I Dreamed a Dream. A lot of people in the crowd stood up and cried, and Simon Cowell said it was the most moving show he had ever seen. Susan showed that people can get through anything if they are strong and have hope. It took her a while to get better. She worked out every day for almost 3 years. To get her left side stronger again, she went to speech therapy, did voice exercises, and worked out. Susan had worked over 1,000 hours to get back about 90% of her voice by early 2025. It was a miracle. Sue then went back to social media on her 64th birthday in April of that same year, after being away for 2 years. She put up a simple note, I'm back, without a doubt back. Thank you for your time. There's new songs, new dreams, and new starts. There were 50,000 comments and 500,000 likes on the post. She also talked about her future film, charity song, live performances, and other projects. She shared videos of herself getting better, her first singing routines, and happy times with her team. Now Susan's return was finally here, as many fans had hoped. They can't wait to hear her inspire again.